The glass doors of Hart Technologies swept open as Caroline Hart crossed into the marble lobby, her heels striking a rhythm that turned heads without her noticing. 32 and already 3 years into running a billion-dollar quantum computing firm,
great job.
We're so
she'd
proud
mastered
of
the
you.
art of commanding rooms through posture alone. The charcoal Armani suit, the determined set of her jaw, the way she moved through space like she owned it. All of it sent one message: CEO first, everything else a distant second. The morning stretched ahead with the weight of consequence. Quarterly projections looked strong. The R&D team had breakthrough results on the new processor architecture. But none of that mattered if Sterling Investment Group walked away. $200 million hung in the balance, enough capital to cement Hart Technologies' expansion into markets her father had only dreamed of reaching. Enough to prove she belonged in the corner office Richard Hart had built from nothing. Caroline checked her watch. 20 minutes until the Boston delegation arrived. Just enough time to review notes one final time, to ensure every number landed precisely where it needed to. The elevator whisked her to the 38th floor, where Morgan Chen waited, tablet in hand and concern etched across her face. The CFO handed over the device without preamble. Revised projections filled the screen, spreadsheets representing 3 analysts' work over 2 solid weeks. But Morgan's expression suggested the numbers weren't the problem. A message had arrived late last night from Sterling's offices. Caroline's eyes narrowed as she read between carefully diplomatic lines. Cultural concerns, traditional values, family stability. Code words that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with her personal life. Or rather, the lack of one. The message crystallized with brutal clarity. Sterling's board had reservations about investing in a company led by a single woman with no family ties. No husband, no children, no roots to keep her grounded when quarterly pressures mounted. Richard Sterling, former Massachusetts governor and current CEO of one of Boston's oldest investment firms, apparently believed business acumen took second place to domestic arrangements. Heat rose in Caroline's chest, that familiar anger she'd learned to compress since taking over from her father. 3 years of doubling market share, pioneering breakthrough technologies, exceeding every projection the board had set, all potentially meaningless because she hadn't carved time from 18-hour workdays to find a husband and produce the 2.5 children that apparently signaled leadership stability. The conference room doors opened at precisely 9 o'clock. Richard Sterling entered first, silver-haired and patrician, every inch the New England aristocrat. His wife, Patricia, followed, Wellesley-educated and serving on half a dozen charitable boards. Their legal counsel and CFO completed the delegation, all of them radiating the kind of old-money confidence that came from 4 generations of never worrying about money. Pleasantries were exchanged with the precision of a Japanese tea ceremony. Presentations unfolded exactly as planned. Caroline walked them through Hart Technologies' position in the quantum computing space, the breakthrough algorithms her team had developed, the contracts already in place with 3 major defense contractors. For 90 minutes, every question received an answer backed by data, every concern addressed with confident expertise. Then the meeting shifted. Richard Sterling cleared his throat during the final discussion, a sound that carried more weight than volume. His words came wrapped in politeness, but landed like stones. Hart Technologies had impressive technical achievements, he acknowledged. The numbers spoke for themselves. But his board had concerns about long-term leadership stability. Caroline maintained her professional smile, years of boardroom battles keeping her expression neutral. She assured him the succession planning was robust, that the company had thrived under her leadership for 3 years, with consistent growth exceeding industry standards. Sterling nodded with the kind of polite patience that preceded rejection. The numbers were indeed impressive, but in his experience, and here his eyes held hers with something between apology and condescension. The most reliable leaders were those with family commitments, people who understood long-term thinking because they had children to consider, wives or husbands to provide perspective, roots that went deeper than quarterly earnings. The implication hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. Patricia Sterling added her own contribution, asking with practiced concern about Caroline's plans for the future. Personal plans, she clarified, as if there were any doubt. The meeting concluded with diplomatic smiles and promises to reconnect in 3 months. As the delegation departed, Caroline remained seated, fingers pressed against the polished conference table, controlling her breathing through sheer force of will. Morgan closed the door. Her voice carried the dry edge Caroline had come to appreciate over 15 years of friendship. Apparently, they'd time-traveled back to 1955. Who knew Boston investment firms had access to temporal technology? Caroline stared at the empty chairs where Sterling's people had sat. This transcended ridiculous. It was 2025, not the Dark Ages. They were judging her ability to run a technology company based on her marital status, as if the existence of a spouse somehow improved her understanding of quantum entanglement or market positioning. She pushed back from the table and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's downtown. 3 years of rebuilding her father's company, doubling market share, pioneering technologies that pushed the industry forward, all of it potentially rendered meaningless because she hadn't found time between product launches and board meetings to acquire a husband like some accessory that completed the executive outfit. The intercom buzzed. Derek Vaughn, her COO, requested an immediate meeting. 20 minutes later, she sat in her office, listening to him outline the board's mounting concerns. Derek had coveted the CEO position since before Richard Hart's retirement, and he barely concealed his satisfaction at her predicament. At 45, impeccably groomed and precisely political, he positioned every word as helpful advice, while his eyes calculated advantage. The board had been monitoring the Sterling situation closely, he explained. They were concerned about the investment falling through, about what it might signal to other potential partners. The implications for Hart Technologies' expansion plans. The potential impact on stock price. Caroline crossed her arms. The question came out flat. And what exactly did they propose she do? Find a husband in the classified ads? Start swiping on dating apps between merger negotiations? Derek's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Actually, they'd suggested a more strategic approach. Gregory Winter's son had just returned from London, Harvard Business School, family connections that would make Sterling feel more comfortable, impeccable pedigree that checked all the right boxes. A dinner could be arranged with minimal effort. The suggestion landed like an insult wrapped in pragmatism. Caroline held Derek's gaze until his smile faltered, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her position clear. She would not arrange a marriage like some medieval princess securing an alliance between kingdoms. Hart Technologies succeeded on innovation and execution, not on her personal life conforming to outdated expectations. Derek raised his hands in mock surrender. Of course, of course. He was simply conveying the board's concerns. But they'd given her 3 months to demonstrate stability, or they'd convene a special session to revisit leadership questions. He was just looking out for the company's best interests, he assured her, the words as hollow as his earlier smile. After Derek left, Caroline called her father. Richard Hart, recovering from heart surgery at his Lake Michigan estate, listened without interrupting as she laid out the Sterling situation. The board's thinly veiled threats, the 3-month deadline that felt more like an ultimatum than a timeline. His voice sounded weaker than she remembered, diminished by illness and age, but his words carried the clarity of 4 decades building empires. The business world hasn't changed as much as we'd like to think, he told her. Traditional investors like Sterling look beyond spreadsheets and profit margins. They want to know who they're trusting their money with. What kind of person sits in the CEO chair when pressure mounts and decisions get hard? Caroline paced her office, frustration bleeding into her voice. So what exactly was she supposed to do? Manufacture a family to satisfy their antiquated notions of stability? Her father's sigh carried through the phone line. He didn't care who she married, if she married at all. He just wanted her to be happy and keep what they'd built together. Don't let them take away everything we've worked for, he said. And she heard in his voice the fear that his legacy might crumble because his daughter refused to play by rules she hadn't written. The call ended with promises to visit soon. Caroline sat at her desk afterward, staring at the family photo from before her mother's death 15 years ago. The three of them on a sailboat. Her father's passion before Hart Technologies consumed his entire existence. Before it became her existence too, swallowing every hour and relationship until work defined the boundaries of her life. Her intercom buzzed again, the car service reporting an engine malfunction. Her Bentley would require servicing, and the driver suggested she might need alternative transportation for the evening. Perfect end to a perfect day. The private elevator carried her to the underground parking where confirmation of the problem awaited. The Bentley's engine refused to turn over, despite the driver's repeated attempts. They'd need to have it towed to the nearest authorized service center, he explained, already pulling out his phone to arrange the details. Rain had started falling by the time Caroline emerged onto Michigan Avenue, the October weather turning from crisp to miserable. She raised her hand for passing cabs, but rush hour traffic meant every taxi already carried passengers. The drizzle transformed into a downpour as she scrolled through her phone for the nearest luxury car service, weighing the wait time against the indignity of getting soaked. The distinctive sound of a sputtering engine caught her attention. Her Bentley, being towed by an older Ford pickup, passed slowly through congested traffic. The truck pulled into an alley beside a brick building bearing a weathered sign, Cole's Auto Repair. Without better options, and with rain now soaking through her Armani suit, Caroline followed. Her Italian leather shoes splashed through puddles that would require professional cleaning. The garage appeared unexpectedly clean for an urban repair shop. Tools organized methodically on pegboards, floors swept despite the constant battle against grease and grime. A radio played classic rock at low volume, the sound mixing with rain drumming on the metal roof. Her Bentley sat in the center bay, hood already open. A pair of worn work boots protruded from underneath the vehicle, attached to legs in oil-stained jeans. The rest of the mechanic remained hidden beneath several thousand pounds of German engineering. Caroline cleared her throat. She was Caroline Hart, she announced to the boots. That was her car. The boots slid out, revealing their owner with efficient economy of movement. The man didn't look up immediately, his attention focused on wiping his hands with a shop rag darkened by years of use. Mid-30s, she estimated, with a broad-shouldered build that came from actual work rather than gym memberships. Dark hair cut military short, more practical than stylish. When he finally met her gaze, Caroline found herself assessed by eyes that carried unexpected intelligence, a mechanic's evaluation that saw past expensive suits to the problem requiring diagnosis. His voice emerged level and professional, carrying none of the excessive deference she'd grown accustomed to. Her driver had mentioned engine trouble. He'd completed a preliminary diagnosis but needed to confirm a few things before providing a full estimate. Caroline checked her watch, the gesture automatic. She needed this resolved quickly. How long would repairs take? He stood, revealing his full height, several inches taller than her despite her heels, and moved to the engine compartment with practiced efficiency. The answer depended on what he found, but she had a rare problem, the kind dealerships typically missed. They'd probably recommend replacing the entire engine, charge her $30,000 over 3 weeks, and leave her without a vehicle the whole time. Caroline raised an eyebrow. And he could do better? He didn't look up from the engine bay. He could isolate the actual problem, probably fix it for under $5,000, have her back on the road by tomorrow afternoon. No sales pitch accompanied the assessment. No attempt to impress or intimidate with technical jargon. Just confidence born of experience, delivered with the kind of straightforward competence that cut through the usual posturing Caroline navigated daily. The front door of the shop burst open, admitting a gust of wind and rain along with a small figure in a bright yellow raincoat. The girl skidded to a stop when she noticed the visitor, her initial momentum arrested by sudden shyness. Dark hair hung in damp curls escaping from her hood. She clutched a slightly soggy paper featuring a prominent red 100 circled at the top. The explosion of words came in a rush. "Daddy, she'd gotten 100 on her science test. Miss Patterson said her drawing of the water cycle was the best she'd ever seen." The sentence cut off midstream as the child became aware of the stranger, her natural exuberance colliding with uncertain reserve. The mechanic's entire demeanor transformed. The focused professional instantly became a proud father, his expression revealing laugh lines that hadn't been visible before. He knelt to examine the test paper with exaggerated interest, giving the child his complete attention, despite Caroline's presence and the disabled Bentley requiring repair. The interaction caught Caroline off guard. Something about the gentleness in those work-roughened hands as he carefully held the paper, the genuine pride in his expression as he studied his daughter's work. He looked up after a moment, including Caroline in the introduction. This was Miss Hart, he explained to his daughter. Her car needed special work, so she'd be their customer for a bit. The girl studied Caroline with the frank curiosity only children possessed. The observation came out without filter or guile. She was really tall and pretty. Did she do important work? Caroline found herself smiling despite the day's earlier frustrations, despite standing in a garage in rain-soaked designer clothes. "Thank you," she replied. "Congratulations on the test. The water cycle was pretty complicated science for someone so young." The girl's face lit up with a compliment. She was going to be a scientist when she grew up, she announced. Or maybe an astronaut. Or maybe both, because why choose when you could do everything? The mechanic straightened, ruffling his daughter's hair with clear affection. "Why not both, indeed? Now go hang up your coat and get started on homework." He'd be done here in about 20 minutes. As the girl darted toward a small desk set up in the office area, she called over her shoulder in a rush of words that sounded like a different language entirely. Caroline's eyebrows rose in surprise, recognizing the cadence, if not the specific words. The mechanic noticed her reaction. His apology came with a slight smile. That was about her grandmother, his late wife's mother. The girl picked up languages like she was collecting them, switching between English and whatever else struck her fancy. She knew he didn't understand much, so sometimes she tested people to see if they did. Caroline processed the information. The girl hadn't been speaking Spanish or French or any of the languages she'd expect. What was she speaking? Just talking about space, he explained. She was in her astronomy phase. Last week it had been dinosaurs. The week before, ocean life. 6-year-olds and their obsessions. The correction landed softly, along with a realization. This wasn't a test of language skills. Just a father indulging his daughter's latest passion, letting her enthusiasm spill out in whatever form it took. Caroline glanced toward the office area where the girl had settled at her desk, already bent over homework with the same focused intensity her father had brought to the engine diagnosis. It was something in his tone when he mentioned his late wife. Not quite regret, but a distinct sense of distance from a former life. The military felt like another lifetime, he added, when Caroline's silence stretched. These days he just fixed problems with 4 wheels. The intercom on Caroline's phone vibrated with a message from Morgan. The board wanted an emergency session to discuss the Sterling meeting. Reality reasserting itself, pulling her back from this strange interlude in a South Loop garage. Caroline asked what she owed for the assessment. He closed the hood with practiced care. Nothing for looking. He'd call tomorrow with the full estimate before proceeding with any work. She handed him her business card, the gesture automatic. "Call my office with the details," she instructed. "I'll need the car as soon as possible." As she turned to leave, already arranging alternative transportation on her phone, the girl's voice called from the office area. "Bye, Miss Hart." She hoped the car would feel better soon. The childish personification of machinery made Caroline smile despite herself, a brief respite from the day's accumulated frustrations. She waved to the girl and stepped back into the rain, refocusing on the board meeting ahead, on the Sterling problem that wouldn't solve itself, on the impossible situation her professional life had become. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the storm system having blown through overnight. Caroline had spent half the night reviewing contingency plans if the Sterling deal fell through. The board had been restless during the emergency session, Derek cleverly stoking their concerns while appearing supportive. She needed that investment. Without it, the ambitious expansion into quantum computing applications would stall, leaving openings for competitors who'd been nipping at Hart Technologies' heels for 2 years. A call from an unknown number interrupted her morning briefing with Morgan. The mechanic's voice came through clear and professional. He'd diagnosed her vehicle. The fuel pressure regulator was failing, triggering a cascade problem with the injection timing. He could repair it for $4,800, parts and labor included. Compared to the dealership's engine replacement recommendation, she'd save about $25,000. The straightforward assessment refreshed after a morning of corporate doublespeak. Caroline asked about the timeline. How soon could it be ready? "End of day today," he replied. He'd already sourced the parts through contacts at specialty suppliers. The work itself would take about 6 hours if he prioritized it. Caroline processed this. That seemed unusually fast for such repairs. She asked why he would prioritize her car over others already in queue. A brief pause. Her driver had mentioned she ran Hart Technologies. His daughter's school used their educational software in the computer lab. It had helped her reading comprehension significantly over the past year. Seemed fair to return the favor. The simple explanation caught Caroline off guard. In her world, favors always came with expectations attached, with calculations of future advantage and strategic positioning. This straightforward reciprocity felt almost foreign. A transaction based purely on balancing scales rather than gaining leverage. She appreciated that, she told him. She'd send her driver to collect the vehicle that afternoon. After ending the call, Caroline stared out her office window at Chicago's skyline stretching toward the lake. Thoughts lingered unexpectedly on the mechanic and his daughter, on something refreshingly genuine about them both. No agenda, no manipulation, just authenticity in a world that traded almost exclusively in performance and positioning. Morgan interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to the contingency financing discussion they'd been working through. But even as Caroline refocused on spreadsheets and strategic options, part of her mind stayed in that garage, turning over the small mystery of a man who voluntarily reduced his own bill because circumstances had improved. 3 hours later, her assistant forwarded a message. The Bentley was ready for pickup. The final invoice came to $4,000 even, $800 less than the estimate. A note was attached, brief and handwritten. Found a better source for the regulator, passing the savings to you. Thanks for being patient with Lily yesterday. N. Cole. Caroline stared at the message for longer than it warranted. When was the last time anyone had voluntarily reduced a bill? In her experience, initial estimates only moved in one direction, upward, with additional fees and unexpected complications that somehow always materialized once work had begun. The gesture, small as it was, stuck with her through afternoon meetings and budget reviews, an anomaly that didn't fit the patterns she'd learned to expect from human interactions. That evening, driving her repaired Bentley home through twilight traffic, Caroline took a detour. The rational part of her mind questioned the impulse, but something drew her back to Cole's auto repair. Perhaps simple curiosity. Perhaps the need to understand this small deviation from her otherwise predictable world. Perhaps something else she wasn't quite ready to examine. The garage remained open, though most bays stood empty. The mechanic's pickup truck was parked outside, along with an older sedan that probably belonged to a customer. Caroline pulled in, noticing immediately that something was wrong. He was pacing near the office area, phone pressed to his ear, expression tense in a way that transformed his earlier calm competence into visible stress. The girl sat on a bench nearby, unusually subdued. Even from a distance, Caroline could see the difficulty in her breathing, the slight wheeze accompanying each inhale. When he saw Caroline, surprise momentarily displaced his worry. Was there a problem with the car? Caroline shook her head. No problem. But clearly something else was happening. Was everything all right? He ended his call, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that spoke of frustration and helplessness in equal measure. Their regular sitter had canceled last minute, family emergency she couldn't avoid. Lily was having an asthma flare-up, nothing critical yet, but definitely requiring medication and monitoring. And he had a transmission rebuild that absolutely had to finish tonight. The customer, a taxi driver named Frank Morrison, needed his vehicle for work tomorrow morning. Frank had 3 kids in foster care depending on his income. Missing a day's work wasn't an option. The girl attempted a brave smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was okay, she told her father. She could just sit here quietly and do her homework. It wouldn't be a problem. He knelt beside her, gently checking her forehead for fever. She was wheezing, he said softly. She needed her medication and rest, not a garage bench for the next 3 hours. The conflict played across his face, visible in the tension around his eyes. Commitment to a customer who genuinely needed help versus his daughter who needed him more. Caroline heard herself speak before conscious thought had fully formed. She could take the girl home, she offered, if he trusted her. Where did she need to go? He looked up, clearly caught off guard by the suggestion. He couldn't ask her to do that. She barely knew them. This went far beyond any normal customer-mechanic relationship. Caroline met his gaze directly. He wasn't asking. She was offering. And she'd already cleared her evening schedule. A minor lie, but meetings could be rescheduled. Where did his daughter need to go? A silent evaluation passed between them. Him weighing his desperate situation against trusting his daughter with someone who is essentially a stranger, albeit one with a verifiable identity and clear means. Her waiting, equally surprised by her own impulse to help, uncertain why she was inserting herself into a stranger's crisis. Finally, he nodded. Their apartment was just 3 blocks east. She needed her inhaler and the nebulizer treatment, the usual protocol when her breathing got this bad. He'd only need about 90 minutes to finish the transmission job, 2 hours maximum if complications arose. The girl looked between them, her breathing audibly labored now. She could show Miss Hart how the medicine worked, she offered. Nurse Kelly at the clinic had taught her the whole routine last time. The child's attempted self-sufficiency broke something in Caroline's carefully constructed defenses. She held out her hand. Come on, she said gently. Let's get you feeling better while your dad finishes his important work. The walk to the apartment was slow, accommodating the girl's breathing difficulties. The building was a pre-war walk-up, modest but well-maintained, the kind of structure with character but minimal amenities. Their third-floor apartment reflected the mechanic's ordered mind. Simple furnishings kept meticulously organized, with touches of warmth in homemade art projects displayed on walls and refrigerator. The girl directed Caroline to her medication with practiced familiarity that no 6-year-old should possess. The nebulizer hummed to life, creating a mist that she breathed through a mask, her small body gradually relaxing as the medication took effect. Caroline sat beside her on a worn but clean sofa, noticing the framed photos on the side table. A beautiful woman with warm eyes smiled beside the mechanic in wedding attire, both of them young and hopeful. The same woman held an infant version of the girl. Family portraits tracked the child's growth: first birthday, second birthday, third birthday, until abruptly the woman disappeared from the timeline. The progression stopped, leaving only father and daughter in subsequent frames. The girl's voice came muffled behind the nebulizer mask, but her eyes watched Caroline closely. "That was her mom," she said matter-of-factly. "She was in heaven now. There had been a car accident when the girl was 3. Her dad said Mom was watching over them like a guardian angel." Caroline felt a pang of recognition, the same abrupt absence that existed in her own family photos after her mother's cancer took her. She shared this carefully, keeping her voice gentle. She'd lost her mother too when she was 17. The girl reached over, patting Caroline's hand with startling empathy. "That was sad," she said. "It was hard, wasn't it?" Sometimes she forgot what her mom's voice sounded like. The simple honesty pierced Caroline's carefully maintained composure more effectively than any business negotiation ever had. "Yes," she agreed. "It was very hard. But it sounded like her dad took very good care of her." The girl nodded, her eyelids growing heavy as the medication and exertion took their toll. "He worked really, really hard," she murmured. "Sometimes too hard. He got tired but pretended he wasn't." Within minutes, she had drifted to sleep, the nebulizer mask still covering her small face. Caroline gently removed it, noticing the medical bills stacked neatly on the kitchen counter. Professional curiosity overrode normal boundaries. A quick glance revealed staggering amounts. Payment plans stretched over months, notations for insurance claims partially denied. The refrigerator featured a payment calendar with meticulously noted due dates for various obligations. This was a household operating on razor-thin margins, with priorities clearly centered around the child's well-being. No television, just bookshelves filled with children's literature and engineering manuals. A desk in the corner held a laptop that had seen better days. Everything spoke of careful management, of someone making impossible math somehow work through sheer determination. The mechanic arrived exactly 90 minutes later, quietly unlocking the door. His expression shifted from exhaustion to relief when he saw his daughter sleeping peacefully, her breathing noticeably better than when Caroline had collected her from the garage. "Thank you for doing this," he said quietly. "I know it's completely outside the normal bounds of any professional relationship." Caroline stood, gathering her coat and purse. "She's a special little girl," she replied. "Very brave for her age." He moved to the kitchen, washing grease from his hands with efficiency born of long practice. Could he offer her some coffee? It was the least he could do after she'd helped with his daughter. Against her better judgment, Caroline accepted. The kitchen was small but functional, and he prepared coffee with the same focused attention he'd given the Bentley's engine, measuring grounds precisely, his movements economical and purposeful. They talked about his daughter's asthma, about the challenges of single parenthood, about the careful balancing act of running a small business while managing medical needs that exceeded what insurance would cover. His late wife had died 3 years ago, he told her. A drunk driver. She'd been dropping off cupcakes at their daughter's preschool. The grief lived in those simple sentences, delivered with practiced control. Caroline recognized the tone. She'd used the same detached delivery when discussing her own mother's illness. Some losses were too large to approach directly. You learn to walk around them, to speak about them from a safe distance. They discussed his military background, 8 years in the Navy as an engineman, specializing in vehicle maintenance for Marine units. It had started as a way to pay for college, turned into a career, then ended when his daughter needed him full-time after her mother's death. His mother-in-law had helped initially, but her own health issues required moving to Arizona last year. Now it was just him and his daughter, with a neighbor who helped when she could, but was getting older herself, finding the stairs to their apartment increasingly difficult. He gestured toward the stack of medical bills, clearly uncomfortable discussing financial difficulties, but seeming to find something in Caroline that encouraged honesty. His daughter's asthma needed better management than their current insurance covered. The specialists recommended a treatment regimen that would cost significantly more out of pocket. He was making it work, he said, but the strain showed in his eyes, in the careful way he chose words that acknowledged reality without quite admitting defeat. Caroline found herself studying him with growing interest. This was a man accustomed to solving problems independently, to carrying burdens without complaint. The bills, the foreclosure notice she'd glimpsed on the counter, the careful budget calendar on the refrigerator, all of it painted a picture of someone fighting an uphill battle with quiet determination. Her phone buzzed. Morgan texting about tomorrow's agenda, about the board's concerns, about Derek's maneuvering for position. The corporate world intruding on this strange domestic interlude, pulling her back toward the life that made sense, that followed rules she understood. She should go, Caroline said. Early day tomorrow. He walked her to the door. Thank you again for helping with my daughter, he said. That was unexpectedly kind. As Caroline reached the hallway, the girl's sleepy voice called from the couch. Bye, Miss Hart. You're nice. You should visit again. The innocent invitation stayed with Caroline during her drive home to the penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The contrast between the modest apartment and her luxury residence couldn't have been starker, yet something about their home had felt more genuine than her carefully designed living space, which functioned more as a showcase than an actual place where life happened. 3 days passed. Caroline requested a background check, discreet and thorough, telling herself it was simple due diligence. The report arrived within 24 hours, comprehensive and revealing in what it confirmed rather than exposed. Distinguished military service, honorable discharge, associate's degree in automotive technology completed while working full-time, exemplary credit despite impossible circumstances, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket in the past decade. The financial section painted a clear picture. Garage building 90 days from foreclosure, medical debt mounting, income barely covering expenses even before his daughter's health costs were factored in. The report also revealed something about his character that raw data couldn't quite capture. Volunteer work teaching automotive skills to transitioning veterans. Customer testimonials that universally praised his honesty and skill. Neighbor interviews describing a devoted father who worked himself to exhaustion but never complained, never made his struggles anyone else's problem. Caroline read the report multiple times over 2 days, each pass revealing new details, new confirmation of what she'd already intuited. Nathan Cole, the report had finally given her his full name, was exactly what he appeared to be. An honest man doing his best under impossible circumstances, asking for no one's help, accepting no one's pity, simply pushing forward because his daughter needed him to. She pulled up the Sterling investment file, reviewing their requirements, their timeline, their barely concealed ultimatum. 3 months to demonstrate personal stability, 3 months to somehow acquire the family structure that would make old men in Boston comfortable investing their money. The calculation formed slowly, piece by piece, like a complex equation resolving itself. Nathan needed financial security and comprehensive health insurance for his daughter. She needed the appearance of family stability to satisfy Sterling and protect her position. Both had needs neither could meet alone. Together, they could solve both problems. The ethical implications swirled through her mind. Was this manipulation? But if both parties benefited, if terms were clearly defined, if no one was deceived about the nature of the arrangement, was it truly wrong? And what about his daughter? That question gave her the longest pause. But the child would receive the medical care she desperately needed, stability, opportunities. Wasn't that worth something? Her father's voice echoed in memory. Sometimes you have to play their game to change the rules. Caroline made her decision. She called Nathan's number, the one from his business card that she'd kept in her desk drawer. When he answered, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. She had a business proposition, she told him. Something unusual that would require an open mind and absolute discretion. Could they meet privately to discuss it? Thursday afternoon found her back at Cole's Auto Repair, arriving during his lunch break as arranged. He looked surprised but professional, greeting her with the same straightforward competence he'd shown before. There was no problem with the Bentley, she assured him, but she did have something important to discuss. Was there somewhere they could talk privately? He cleared a chair in his small office, remaining standing himself, waiting. Caroline took a breath, steadying herself for what she was about to propose. What I'm going to suggest will sound unusual, she began, perhaps even offensive. But I ask that you hear me out completely before responding. His expression turned wary. That's not the most reassuring start to a conversation. She nodded, acknowledging his concern. Then she laid it out, clinical and direct. Hart Technologies was negotiating a critical investment with Sterling Investment Group, but they'd expressed reservations about investing in a company led by an unmarried woman. They considered it a stability risk, she explained, unable to keep the bitterness entirely from her voice. Her board shared these concerns. They'd given her 3 months to demonstrate personal stability or risk losing her position. She watched understanding dawn in his eyes, watched him begin to put the pieces together before she'd even stated her proposal explicitly. I'm suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement, she said clearly. A marriage of convenience lasting 1 year. You would receive a monthly stipend equivalent to an executive administrator's salary, comprehensive health insurance for you and your daughter, and ownership of your garage building transferred to you free and clear at the conclusion of our arrangement. He stared at her, incredulity battling with something else in his expression. Recognition of his desperation, perhaps, or anger at having it so clearly identified and exploited. You want to hire me to be your husband? He said flatly. A business arrangement, she corrected. Temporary and strictly defined. You help me secure my position and the Sterling investment. I help you secure financial stability and proper health care for your daughter. He stood abruptly, pacing the small office, hand running through his hair. This was insane, he said. She didn't even know him. They were strangers. Caroline remained seated, keeping her voice level. She knew enough. She'd done her homework. His military record was exemplary. His financial difficulties stemmed from his daughter's medical needs, not poor judgment. He was honorable, hardworking, and clearly his daughter's well-being was his highest priority. His head snapped toward her. You ran a background check on me. She didn't apologize. Of course she had. She wouldn't propose this arrangement without due diligence. His service record, his business history, his personal character. She'd verified all of it. The investigation had revealed a man struggling through circumstances beyond his control, not through any failing of his own. His jaw tightened. So you know I'm about to lose this place. You know I'm desperate. And you think you can just... She cut him off gently. I think we can help each other. Neither of us needs to be anyone's charity case. This is a transaction, a business deal where both parties benefit. He turned away, looking through the office window at his daughter, who was carefully completing homework at her small desk, unaware of the conversation that might change her life. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its sharp edge, replaced by something heavier, something that sounded like defeat accepting itself. "I promised her mother I'd always take care of her," he said quietly, "that I'd give her every opportunity. Now I'm about to lose this business, maybe even our apartment. Her treatments keep getting more expensive. The specialist says she needs medication that costs—" He stopped himself, shaking his head as if the specific number didn't matter, which perhaps it didn't. What mattered was the gap between what his daughter needed and what he could provide. "You're not failing her," Caroline said softly. "You're facing impossible choices that no parent should have to make. I'm offering a solution." He turned back to face her. "A solution that involves lying to her, teaching her that marriage is a business transaction." Caroline had anticipated this objection. They could tell his daughter the truth, she said, an age-appropriate version, that they were special friends helping each other, no different from him helping their neighbor with groceries in exchange for childcare. A fair exchange between people who respected each other. Nathan didn't look convinced. "And what about the rest of the world? Your fancy corporate board and Boston investors?" To them, Caroline explained, they would present as a committed couple who married after a genuine connection. A love story that checked all their boxes. The devoted single father meets the career-focused executive. They find unexpected balance together. It would play well in the media, satisfy Sterling's concerns, and protect both their interests. What exactly would this arrangement entail, he asked. Where would they live? What would people expect from them? Caroline had thought this through carefully. For appearances, they would need to cohabitate. Her penthouse had 3 bedrooms, plenty of space for privacy. His daughter would have access to the best schools and medical care in Chicago. He could continue running his business without financial pressure. After 1 year, they would quietly divorce, setting irreconcilable differences. No drama, no scandal. Everyone walks away better than they started. Nathan's laugh held no humor. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" "It's what she did," Caroline replied simply. "Identify problems, create solutions, execute efficiently." "And what about my daughter?" His voice sharpened. "She's not a business problem to solve. She's a little girl who's already lost her mother. What happens to her when this arrangement ends and suddenly she loses you too?" The challenge struck home. Caroline hadn't fully considered the emotional impact on the child, had perhaps deliberately avoided examining that particular complication. She thought quickly. He was right, she acknowledged. His daughter's well-being came first. They would move slowly, she suggested. Introduce changes gradually. The child could maintain her relationship with their neighbor, keep connections to her current life. The transition would be presented as an adventure, not a replacement for what she'd lost. Nathan studied her with those observant eyes that seemed to see beyond her corporate persona. "Why me?" he asked. "You could find 1,000 men in Chicago willing to make this deal, probably for less trouble and money." The question caught Caroline off guard because she'd asked herself the same thing repeatedly over the past 3 days. The logical answer was convenience and opportunity. He'd appeared at precisely the right moment with the right combination of needs and character traits. But something deeper had influenced her choice, something she hesitated to examine too closely. "You're genuine," she said finally. "In my world, that's rare and valuable. Your daughter adores you, which speaks volumes about your character. And frankly, you have no connections to my corporate sphere, which minimizes complications and conflicts of interest." It was all true, if not quite the complete truth. Nathan turned back to the window, watching his daughter remove an inhaler from her backpack and take a careful puff, the action so practiced it barely interrupted her homework. His expression reflected the weight of fatherhood, the impossible calculation of trying to determine what would truly serve his child best. Finally, he spoke. I'd need conditions. Non-negotiable ones. Caroline nodded, relief flooding through her. He was considering it. Name them, she said. His conditions came clear and firm. First, they wouldn't lie to his daughter. They would explain in terms she could understand, but there would be honesty, not deception. Second, he would keep working. No playing trophy husband. His business was his identity, and he wouldn't lose who he was. Third, his daughter's routine would stay as consistent as possible. Her needs came first, always. Fourth, separate bedrooms. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. And fifth, everything in writing. Clear terms, clear timeline, clear exit strategy. Caroline agreed to everything. She already had contracts drafted, she told him. Her lawyers could incorporate his conditions immediately. Nathan shook his head, a hint of dry humor returning. Of course you do. Has anyone ever told you that you're slightly terrifying? Caroline found herself smiling. Only everyone I've ever worked with. And if we're getting married, even on paper, you should probably start calling me Caroline instead of Miss Hart. Their eyes met across the small office, an unexpected moment of connection amid the strangest negotiation either had ever conducted. Nathan extended his hand formally. I still think this is crazy, he said. But for my daughter, I'll do it. Caroline took his hand, noting the strength in his grip, the calluses that spoke of years of manual labor. Thank you, Nathan. I believe this arrangement will benefit us both. As their hands separated, his daughter's voice called from outside the office. Daddy, can I have lunch now? Mrs. Rodriguez brought tamales. Nathan's expression softened immediately. I'll be right there, Lily. He turned back to Caroline, the weight of their agreement evident in his gaze. I hope we both know what we're getting into. Caroline wished she could offer certainty, but in truth, she was venturing far outside her realm of expertise. She'd structured the arrangement like a business deal, with clear terms and projected outcomes. But something told her that the human elements, the child's heart, this man's pride, her own unexpected reactions to them both, wouldn't conform neatly to contractual clauses. Welcome to the most unconventional merger in Chicago business history, she said. The autumn sunlight filtering through the garage windows caught the dust motes swirling between them, illuminating the invisible lines that had somehow drawn them together in this unlikely alliance. Whether it would lead to disaster or salvation remained to be seen. But for now, they had a contract to draft, a story to create, and a little girl waiting for lunch. An unexpectedly ordinary beginning to what would prove the most extraordinary arrangement of their lives. 2 weeks of preparation had transformed the theoretical into the tangible. Contracts signed, arrangements finalized, belongings packed. Now Caroline stood in her penthouse watching Nathan carry boxes through the door while Lily sat cross-legged on the marble floor, arranging stuffed animals in a careful semicircle. The girl whispered to her toys, words too soft to hear but intent clear enough. She was trying to comfort them when she herself needed comforting, facing a change larger than any 6-year-old should have to navigate. Nathan set down another box, surveying the space with an expression somewhere between discomfort and disbelief. The penthouse occupied the entire 48th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon. 3,200 square feet of marble and hardwood, designer furniture positioned with mathematical precision, art on walls that probably cost more than his truck. Everything pristine and minimal and utterly impersonal, more hotel suite than home. Caroline emerged from her office, tablet in hand, still dressed for work despite the weekend. The guest suite was ready, she announced without preamble. She'd cleared the closets and dressers per their agreement. Her gaze fell on Lily with her stuffed animals, uncertainty flickering across her features. Did the child need anything special? Different lighting? storage solutions for toys. The awkwardness in her tone revealed how far outside her expertise this situation pushed her. Nathan recognized the look of someone consulting an instruction manual for a device they'd never encountered. Kids needed consistency during transitions, he explained gently. They brought Lily's nightlight, her favorite blanket, the sound machine she'd used since infancy. The familiar objects would anchor her while everything else shifted. The rest would work itself out in time. Caroline nodded, already making mental notes, approaching parenthood like a project requiring research and optimization. She'd scheduled an appointment with Dr. Patel for tomorrow, the pediatric pulmonologist she'd mentioned. The office had agreed to fit Lily in as a favor, fast-tracking what normally required weeks of waiting. Nathan's jaw tightened at the reminder. Every benefit came stamped with the knowledge that he couldn't have provided it himself. That was fast, he managed, the words carrying more weight than their surface meaning. Caroline missed the tension, still focused on her checklist. She'd also updated their cover story, she continued, the narrative they'd present to the world. They'd met 6 months ago when he'd serviced her vehicle, kept in touch sporadically. The connection had grown organically over time. Given her father's recent health concerns and Lily's medical needs, they'd decided to formalize their relationship rather than wait, a practical decision made by practical people who'd found unexpected compatibility. Lily looked up from her stuffed animal arrangement, catching fragments of adult conversation. Are we having a party? Mrs. Rodriguez says people have parties when they get married, with cake and dancing and everything. The innocent question highlighted what they'd overlooked in their strategic planning. Children expected celebration for significant life events. Caroline and Nathan exchanged glances, both recognizing the problem. They'd agreed to a small civil ceremony, documented for appearances but stripped of sentimentality. A business transaction disguised as a life milestone. But Lily's hopeful expression demanded something more than courthouse efficiency. Caroline surprised them both by kneeling beside the girl, maintaining careful distance from the stuffed animal circle. Would you like a small party? Nothing too elaborate, but special enough to mark the occasion properly? Lily's eyes widened with possibilities. Could I wear a pretty dress? And maybe there could be cake? Her voice carried the kind of hope that could break hearts if disappointed. Something cracked in Caroline's carefully maintained composure. Of course, she replied, her voice softer than Nathan had heard it. Every special occasion needs cake. That's practically a rule. Nathan watched the exchange with complicated emotions. Caroline was trying. He had to acknowledge that truth. But each step deeper into this elaborate charade increased his discomfort, amplified the potential for eventual damage. They were building a fiction that would have to collapse eventually, and Lily would be caught in the wreckage. Later that evening, they attempted their first family dinner. Caroline had ordered from an upscale restaurant, beautifully plated meals arriving in insulated containers. Nathan would have just cooked something simple, pasta maybe, or grilled chicken. But he'd agreed to this arrangement, which meant accepting her world and its assumptions about how things should be done. They sat at the formal dining table designed for 8, using only 3 of its seats. The distance between them felt metaphorical as much as physical. Lily chattered nervously about her new bedroom, about being able to see the lake from her window, about hoping the boats she'd spotted were interesting. She filled silence with questions about her new school starting Monday, about whether her teacher would be nice, about whether kids would like her. The adults navigated conversation like diplomats at a tense summit. Caroline asked about Nathan's day with stilted formality. Nathan inquired about her work with careful politeness. Both were acutely aware of each word, each gesture, performing normalcy for Lily's benefit while feeling anything but normal themselves. Lily's observations cut through the pretense with childish directness. Why did they sit so far apart? Jenny's parents held hands during dinner. Why did they talk like they were at a school meeting instead of home? Each question spotlighted the artificiality they were trying to hide. Caroline deflected with half-truths about different families having different ways of being together. Nathan changed subjects, asking about Lily's homework. But the damage was done, the cracks visible in their carefully constructed facade. Small victories emerged despite the awkwardness. Caroline showed genuine interest when Lily explained her science project. Nathan found himself appreciating Caroline's intelligence when she discussed the quantum computing breakthrough her team had achieved. They shared a laugh when Lily told her favorite joke, something about atoms making up everything, her delivery earnest and proud. After Lily's bedtime, Nathan found Caroline on the terrace overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. Autumn chill was settling in, carrying the promise of winter. He'd been thinking about Lily's questions at dinner, he began, about how quickly children formed emotional attachments. She was already investing in the idea of them as a family unit. Caroline leaned against the railing, her silhouette sharp against the city lights. She'd noticed too, she admitted. She hadn't anticipated how rapidly children processed and internalized change. Perhaps they needed clearer boundaries, better definitions of what this arrangement actually was. Nathan's frustration bled into his voice. Boundaries. She's 6 years old. She sees a kind woman suddenly living with her and her dad, talking about parties and cake. In her mind, they were already a family. Explaining the nuances of contractual arrangements to a first grader wasn't exactly feasible. The reality hung between them, heavy and undeniable. The arrangement made perfect sense on paper, in spreadsheets and legal documents, but it overlooked the most vulnerable person involved, the one whose heart didn't understand business logic or strategic positioning. Caroline's phone chimed, shattering the moment. Morgan with a message. The PR team had their announcement prepared for Monday's release. The story would break in the business section, carefully crafted to hit exactly the right notes. She showed Nathan the draft. The language painted their union in broad, romantic strokes, while emphasizing practical compatibility. Respected CEO Caroline Hart had found unexpected love with decorated Navy veteran Nathan Cole. The devoted single father brought grounding perspective to her high-pressure corporate world. Their shared values and complementary strengths had led to rapid courtship. Sometimes you just know, the fabricated quote attributed to Caroline read. Nathan studied the words, unease growing with each sentence. This makes me sound like a character from a Hallmark movie, he observed. The devoted father who sacrificed career advancement, the blue-collar hero with a heart of gold. It reduced his actual life to a collection of marketable traits. Caroline reclaimed her phone. That's precisely the point, she replied. The narrative needs to appeal to Sterling's sensibilities, to their ideas about what constitutes proper family structure and values. She paused, her voice dropping slightly. None of it is entirely untrue, just strategically emphasized. Nathan's gaze sharpened. Except the love part. That's entirely fiction, and we both know it. An unexpected flicker crossed Caroline's face before she turned back to the city lights. Yes, she agreed after a beat. Of course. Monday brought the media announcement and immediate ripples through Chicago's business community. Nathan drove Lily to her new school in his pickup truck, preserving that one routine amid the upheaval. Caroline headed to Hart Technologies to face the inevitable questions and careful congratulations that would mask curiosity and calculation in equal measure. Morgan was waiting in Caroline's office, tablet displaying the announcement alongside early reactions. Bonjour were apparently in order, she observed, her tone carrying the weight of 15 years' friendship. The board was cautiously optimistic. Derek had gone suspiciously quiet, and Sterling's representatives had already requested dinner with Caroline and her new husband for the following week. That was fast, Caroline noted, setting down her briefcase. Morgan studied her friend's face with the kind of scrutiny that came from knowing someone through business school, career building, personal losses. This is really happening, isn't it? You're actually marrying the mechanic. Caroline bristled slightly at the reductive description. His name is Nathan. And yes, Friday at the courthouse. Small ceremony, family only. Morgan raised an eyebrow. Family meaning? My father, Caroline replied. Nathan's daughter. You, if you're available. She busied herself with morning emails, avoiding her friend's too knowing gaze. Morgan set aside her tablet. I've known you since Wharton. In 15 years, I've never seen you date anyone for more than 3 months. Now you're suddenly marrying someone you met when, exactly? The challenge in her voice was impossible to ignore. Caroline had anticipated skepticism, but hadn't prepared for direct confrontation from the one person who knew her best. She met Morgan's gaze directly, falling back on the prepared narrative. It's not conventional, she admitted, but neither am I. Nathan is different, stable, grounded in ways that make sense to me right now. Morgan's expression softened slightly. Does he understand what he's getting into? The scrutiny, the expectations? Your world isn't exactly forgiving to outsiders who don't know the unwritten rules. The question struck uncomfortably close to concerns Caroline had been suppressing. Nathan had spent his adult life in environments where directness and competence mattered more than social nuance. Heart technologies operated in subtler currencies: influence, appearance, strategic relationships. He would be entering a battlefield without recognizing half the weapons. Later that week, Caroline arranged for Nathan to meet with an image consultant. Derek's suggestion, though she'd initially resisted the idea. Bradley Hoffman arrived at the penthouse with racks of clothing, opinions about everything, and the kind of precisely groomed appearance that made Nathan visibly uncomfortable. The first hour proceeded with military stoicism. Nathan endured measurements for suits, recommendations for haircuts, subtle trimming, nothing dramatic, and selections of ties and shoes appropriate for corporate events. His Navy training served him well, following orders even when every instinct resisted. The breaking point came when Bradley began reviewing Nathan's conversational approach. They needed to minimize references to his blue-collar background, the consultant suggested with practiced delicacy. Military service was fine, patriotic, even admirable, but perhaps frame it more strategically. Leadership development rather than fixing trucks and maintaining equipment. Focus on the management aspects, the strategic thinking, not the manual labor. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, listening. Bradley continued, warming to his subject. And there was the matter of Nathan's accent. Nothing terrible, he hastened to add, but there was a subtle working-class Chicago inflection. For board functions and high-level events, more refined diction would serve better. He could recommend an excellent speech coach who'd worked with several executives from non-traditional backgrounds. Nathan stood abruptly. I'm not ashamed of who I am or where I come from. The words coming out harder than perhaps he'd intended. Bradley blinked, caught off guard. Oh no one's suggesting shame. Just polish. Professional presentation. Surely he wanted to fit into Caroline's world. I agreed to wear the suits, Nathan continued, his voice controlled but inflexible. I didn't agree to become someone else entirely. The distinction was absolute. He walked out, still wearing the new dress shirt, but deliberately keeping his old work boots, a small rebellion against the transformation being imposed. Caroline returned home to find Bradley packing up, flustered and clearly affronted. Nathan was on the terrace, posture radiating defiance and something deeper. Anger at being asked to erase himself, perhaps, or recognition of just how much this arrangement would demand. Your consultant mentioned there was an incident, Caroline ventured carefully. Nathan didn't turn around. Your fashion guru suggested I needed elocution lessons. Apparently my working-class Chicago accent might embarrass you at board functions. Caroline winced. She could imagine exactly how Bradley had phrased it, all passive-aggressive concern wrapped in professional advice. Bradley can be overzealous, she offered. His job is to anticipate potential issues. Nathan turned, anger clear in his eyes. The potential issue is that I'm not ashamed of who I am. I served my country. I work with my hands. I speak the way I speak. If that's a problem for your world, maybe we need to reconsider this entire arrangement. The words hung between them, the first real threat to their carefully constructed agreement. Caroline took a breath, then surprised herself with genuine contrition. You're right. I apologize. That was wrong of me to even suggest. A pause, vulnerability showing through her usual control. I've spent my entire adult life performing versions of myself. Calculated adjustments to fit whatever room I'm in, whatever deal I'm negotiating. I forgot that's not normal. That it's actually kind of terrible. Nathan's anger deflated slightly, replaced by something closer to understanding. Integrity doesn't measure by corner offices or titles, he said quietly. It measures by what you do when no one's watching, when there's no advantage to gain from doing right. That's the only standard worth caring about. The moment stretched between them, something shifting in the space they occupied together. Not quite connection, not quite trust, but perhaps the beginning of mutual recognition. Lily interrupted by running onto the terrace, homework paper clutched triumphantly. Caroline! She'd passed her spelling test, every word correct, including the really hard one, astronaut. Mrs. Rodriguez had said she was very proud. The girl threw her arms around Caroline's waist in spontaneous affection. Caroline froze for a heartbeat, clearly unused to physical displays of emotion, before awkwardly patting Lily's back. Nathan watched his daughter already bonding, already investing emotionally in a relationship that came with an expiration date neither child understood nor adult could explain without causing harm. The next morning brought Nathan's scheduled breakfast with James Hart. The invitation had come directly from Caroline's father, bypassing Caroline entirely. Just a chance to get acquainted, the message had read, but Nathan recognized interrogation when he saw it, however politely phrased. The drive to Lake Forest took 45 minutes through increasingly wealthy neighborhoods until he reached the gated community where old money built estates overlooking Lake Michigan. The Hart property sprawled across 3 manicured acres, the main house a colonial revival mansion that spoke of generations of accumulated wealth. James Hart received him in a sunroom overlooking the water. At 68, recently recovered from surgery, but still formidable, he carried himself with a kind of authority that came from building empires rather than inheriting them. The resemblance to Caroline was striking. The same analytical eyes, the same way of holding silence until others felt compelled to fill it. So you're the man who supposedly captured my daughter's heart in record time, James began without preamble. Naval engineering, small business owner, single father. Quite the resume. The directness was almost refreshing after weeks of corporate doublespeak. Nathan met the older man's gaze without flinching. I'm guessing you didn't invite me here to exchange pleasantries, Mr. Hart. James's eyes narrowed slightly, evaluating. No. I invited you to understand what kind of man agrees to this particular arrangement with my daughter. Nathan stiffened. You know. James nodded once, decisive. Caroline doesn't make impulsive romantic decisions. Never has. When she announced she was marrying a mechanic she'd barely known for 6 months, it took about 5 minutes to deduce what was actually happening. He leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades building business empires. What's your price? Mr. Cole. What does it cost to rent a husband these days? The deliberate crudeness of the phrasing hit its mark. Nathan stood, hands clenched. I think we're done here. James remained seated, expression unchanged. Sit down. If you storm out now, you'll only confirm my suspicions that you can't handle difficult conversations. And my daughter needs someone who can handle difficulty without flinching. Nathan hesitated, then slowly retook his seat. Your daughter proposed a business arrangement that solves problems for both of us, he said carefully. There's nothing sordid about a mutually beneficial agreement between adults. James studied him for a long moment. My daughter is brilliant at business, absolutely exceptional, but she's remarkably naive about people. She believes she can compartmentalize everything, separate emotion from transaction, personal from professional, keep everything in neat boxes that never touch. He gestured toward the window overlooking the lake. I've lived in this house for 35 years. Built a company, raised a daughter, buried a wife I loved more than I knew how to express while she was alive. You know what I learned? Nathan waited. Life doesn't respect the boundaries we try to impose on it, James continued, especially when children are involved. You think you can keep this arrangement purely transactional, but that little girl in your life? She's not going to understand contracts and exit strategies. She's going to bond with Caroline. Love her, probably. And when this arrangement ends, and it will end one way or another, she'll be the one who pays the price. The assessment cut deeper than Nathan wanted to admit. He justified the arrangement as necessary for Lily's medical care, but he'd avoided examining the fuller implications. What it taught her about relationships, about solving problems, about authenticity versus performance. James's expression softened slightly, something almost like sympathy crossing his features. I won't interfere. Caroline makes her own decisions and always has, even when I wish she'd listen to counsel. But understand this clearly. If you hurt my daughter, contract or no contract, intentions or no intentions, there will be consequences. I've spent 40 years protecting what I built. That includes protecting her. Nathan met the older man's gaze steadily. I have no intention of hurting anyone. We've been very clear about the parameters of this arrangement. James's smile held no warmth. No one ever intends to cause harm. And yet, he stood, moving to the window. Let me tell you something about intentions versus reality. My marriage to Elizabeth, Caroline's mother, started as a pragmatic arrangement. Two wealthy families wanting to strengthen business ties. She was 22, I was 25. Neither of us wanted it. He pulled a photo from his desk, showing it to Nathan. A young James and a beautiful woman in wedding attire, their smiles stiff and forced, nothing of genuine joy in the image. Took us 3 years before we actually fell in love, James continued. 5 years before we admitted it to each other. Then we had 15 years of genuine happiness before cancer took her. He set the photo down carefully. Life doesn't respect our plans, Mr. Cole. Sometimes the best things start in unexpected ways. Sometimes arrangements become real, but only if you're honest with each other and with yourself about what's developing. Nathan absorbed this revelation, recalibrating his understanding of both James and Caroline. The older man wasn't threatening him or judging him. He was offering hard-won wisdom from someone who'd walked a similar path decades earlier. One more thing, James added. Derek Vaughn is presenting his case to the board tomorrow at 2 p.m. He's gathered evidence about your arrangement, financial transfers, timeline coincidences, testimony from household staff. Caroline will be blindsided. He specifically arranged this to catch her off guard when she can't prepare. Nathan's chest tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because I loved my wife, James replied simply. And I love my daughter. Your arrangement may have started this business, but I see how Caroline looks at you when she thinks no one's watching. And I see how you look at her. Maybe there's something real trying to emerge from this strategy you've constructed. Maybe it's worth fighting for. That's your decision to make. But you deserve fair warning of what's coming. Friday afternoon arrived with autumn sunshine and nervous energy. The Cook County Courthouse ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock, maximum efficiency with minimum sentimentality. Lily wore a blue dress she'd picked herself from Target, insisting it was perfect because it had pockets and also twirled when she spun. She carried a small bouquet of daisies, taking her role as flower girl with absolute seriousness. Morgan stood beside Caroline, expression carefully neutral, but eyes communicating volumes. James sat in the second row, his presence carrying weight beyond mere attendance. Nathan's friend Mike from the Veterans Automotive Training Program had come, along with Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd insisted on being there to see Lily's big moment. The judge's routine words carried unexpected heaviness. Nathan found himself listening to vows he'd spoken once before with genuine love, now repeating them as contractual obligation. Caroline's voice remained steady, but something in her eyes suggested she felt the weight too, the gap between the words' traditional meaning and their current purpose. The kiss came at the judge's instruction, brief and chaste, performed for the small audience and legal requirement. But something electric passed between them in that moment of contact, a current neither had anticipated. Both noticed. Both chose to ignore it, filing it away as an anomaly requiring no examination. The small reception afterward took place at the penthouse. Catered finger foods, champagne for adults, sparkling cider for Lily. The intimate group maintained their pretense, raising glasses to the happy couple while carefully avoiding eye contact that might reveal too much knowledge of the truth. Morgan's toast walked a careful line. To Caroline, the smartest person I know. And to Nathan, a brave man taking on quite the challenge. Her eyes held private meaning Caroline couldn't quite decipher. James offered his own words. To new beginnings. Sometimes they surprise us in ways we don't expect. The cryptic phrasing could mean anything or nothing. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke with simple genuineness. To a beautiful family. Lily deserves all the happiness in the world. Her words carried no hidden meaning, just sincere hope that made Nathan's chest ache with the deception they were performing. Lily charmed everyone who'd listen, showing her rock collection and explaining the difference between igneous and metamorphic formations with 6-year-old authority. She was completely content, glowing with the attention and celebration, unaware of the complexity surrounding the day's events. Nathan found Caroline alone on the terrace while the party continued inside. Your father thinks we're making a terrible mistake, he observed, watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. Caroline didn't turn from her contemplation of the water. He expressed similar concerns to me, but he's also a pragmatist. He understands what's at stake, with Sterling, with the board, with everything I've built. Nathan pressed the question he'd been avoiding. Is it worth it? All this deception just to satisfy some outdated expectations about what a CEO should look like? Caroline finally faced him, something fierce flashing in her eyes. It's not just about Sterling's investment. It's about maintaining control of my company. My father built Heart Technologies from nothing, poured his entire life into creating something that would last. I won't be the one who loses it because of corporate politics and gender bias. She paused, her voice intensifying. Sometimes you have to play their game to change the rules. You have to get inside the system before you can dismantle it. The conviction in her words revealed more than perhaps she'd intended. The pressure she carried as Richard Hart's daughter and successor, the constant need to prove herself in ways male CEOs never faced, the exhausting performance of being twice as good to be considered half as competent. For the first time, Nathan saw beyond the polished corporate facade to the woman underneath, determined, yes, but also carrying weight that would crush someone less resilient. Protecting a legacy at any cost because the alternative meant admitting defeat to forces that shouldn't have power in a rational world. Tuesday evening brought their preview dinner with Sterling investment representatives. Not the full board yet, just Richard and Patricia Sterling, along with their CFO and legal counsel. An intimate gathering designed to assess the new family situation before committing fully to the investment. The Peninsula Hotel's private dining room offered traditional American fine dining in an atmosphere designed to put everyone at ease while maintaining proper formality. Nathan wore one of his new suits, Brooks Brothers navy, that fit well enough he almost forgot it wasn't his clothes. Almost. Patricia Sterling led the initial conversation, asking polite questions designed to evaluate while seeming merely friendly. How did automotive work compare to Nathan's Navy engineering experience? Nathan answered honestly. The fundamentals remained the same regardless of context. Diagnose the problem, identify the solution, execute the repair. The Navy had taught him systems thinking, understanding how each component affected the whole, how failure in one area cascaded through everything else. That principle applied equally to diesel engines and transmission systems. Richard Sterling nodded with what appeared to be genuine approval. Systems thinking. Good foundation. Business operates on the same principles. Everything connects to everything else. The more pointed question came wrapped in casual conversation. Richard observed that Nathan had married quite an accomplished woman, CEO of a major company. Some men might find that intimidating or difficult to navigate. The trap was obvious enough. Testing Nathan's ego, his comfort with a successful spouse, whether traditional masculine insecurity would create problems. Nathan met Sterling's eyes directly. I find it inspiring, sir. Caroline built her success through intelligence and determination. Those are qualities I deeply respect. I may repair engines, but I recognize exceptional engineering when I see it, whether in machines or business strategy. Caroline's hand tightened on his under the table, a small gesture of gratitude that felt more real than strategic. Patricia shifted focus to Lily, asking how the child was adjusting to having a new mother figure. The question carried delicate weight, requiring careful navigation. Nathan chose his words precisely. Lily lost her mom young. No one replaces that loss. But Caroline's been wonderful. Patient, genuinely interested in Lily's education, supportive in ways that matter. My daughter lights up when Caroline helps with science projects. He turned to Caroline, keeping his voice sincere. She has a gift for explaining complex things so a 6-year-old can understand. That's rare. Caroline picked up the thread naturally. Lily's brilliant. Yesterday she explained orbital mechanics using tennis balls and a flashlight. I learned as much from watching her think through the problem as she learned from the demonstration. She smiled, and Nathan recognized it as genuine rather than performed. She reminds me why I went into technology in the first place. That curiosity about how things work. A moment of authentic connection passed between them, visible enough that Richard and Patricia exchanged a glance. Something unspoken communicated between the older couple, some evaluation or recognition that Nathan couldn't quite read. Over coffee, Richard suggested a private conversation. He and Nathan stepped onto the hotel's terrace overlooking Michigan Avenue. October night air carrying the chill of approaching winter. Richard's approach became more direct without the audience. I've built my firm on reading people, Mr. Cole. 40 years of evaluating character, determining who to trust with significant capital. You're real. I can see that clearly. He paused, studying Nathan's face. But I also see calculation, careful answers, performance. Nathan waited, uncertain where this was leading. Are you performing for me? Richard asked. For Caroline? Or for yourself? The question cut to something Nathan had been avoiding examining. He chose honesty. Honestly, sir? I'm not entirely sure anymore. The lines have gotten blurrier than I expected when this started. Richard's unexpected smile carried warmth for the first time that evening. Good answer. A dishonest man would claim everything is perfectly genuine. A smart man admits when boundaries start dissolving. He clapped Nathan's shoulder. My own marriage started as an arrangement. Families wanting business alliance. I thought I'd never love Patricia. Never feel anything beyond contractual obligation. Ended up falling completely. The confession reframed everything Nathan thought he understood about the Sterling's evaluation. 40 years later, I can't imagine life without her, Richard continued. The arrangement became real. It happened slowly at first, then all at once, like waking up one day and realizing the performance had become truth somewhere along the way. He looked Nathan in the eyes. Whatever started your arrangement, pay attention to what it's becoming. Because I see how Caroline looks at you when she thinks no one's watching, and I see how you look at her. Maybe there's something real trying to emerge from your strategy. Nathan's heart pounded. Was it that obvious? Were they that transparent? Or was Richard seeing what he wanted to see, projecting his own experience onto their situation? Richard delivered his final message. Sterling Investment will approve the deal. Paperwork will be finalized next week. Congratulations on securing your wife's company's future. He paused. And congratulations on your marriage. I hope it brings you both what you need, whether that's what you originally planned or something you never anticipated. They rejoined the group, the evening concluding with handshakes and promises of future dinners once the investment was formalized. In the car afterward, Caroline allowed herself a moment of triumph, tension releasing from her shoulders. It's working, she said, wonder in her voice. They loved you. Did you see Mrs. Sterling's reaction when you talked about Lily's science project? That personal connection was exactly what we needed. Nathan nodded, but Richard's words echoed in his mind. The lines between performance and reality were blurring. He'd noticed it happening, had tried to ignore it, but the older man's observation made it impossible to deny. Something was shifting between them. Something neither had planned for or could easily control. The following Saturday brought an unexpected development. Nathan was scheduled to work late at the garage on a complex engine rebuild. Mrs. Rodriguez, their usual backup for childcare, was visiting her sister in Milwaukee. The solution should have been simple. Caroline would watch Lily for a few hours. But Caroline hesitated, clearly uncertain about managing a 6-year-old alone for an extended period. Lily solved the problem by requesting a baking lesson. She'd seen a show about making cookies and wanted to try. Caroline, who hadn't baked since her mother taught her decades ago, found herself agreeing before fully thinking it through. Nathan returned home around 7 to find the kitchen transformed. Flour dusted every surface. Baking sheets covered the counter, chocolate chip cookies in various stages of completion, and Caroline and Lily, both wearing aprons, Caroline's clearly just purchased from the look of pristine fabric, covered in batter and laughing about something. Lily spotted him first. "Daddy, we're making cookies! Caroline's teaching me fractions using measuring cups. See, 1/2 + 1/2 makes 1 whole." The girl's face glowed with happiness beyond anything Nathan had seen in months. Caroline looked up, flour smudged on her cheek, hair slightly messed in a way her corporate self would never allow. She actually looked relaxed. Lily mentioned wanting to bake, she explained, falling into her characteristic justification pattern. I remembered my mother teaching me this way. It's a practical application of mathematical concepts. Nathan couldn't help smiling at the very Caroline approach of finding educational value in simple enjoyment. "Smells great," he offered. "Do you need any help?" Lily shook her head emphatically. "This is girls' baking time. Daddy can taste test when we're finished, but the actual baking is just for us girls." The casual designation hung in the air, girls' baking time, placing Caroline in a maternal category without hesitation or question. Lily had unconsciously created a framework that positioned Caroline as her mother figure, a development neither adult had anticipated or prepared for. Later that night, after Lily had finally gone to sleep, Nathan found Caroline in the kitchen finishing the cleanup. She'd changed from the apron, but still had traces of flour on her expensive loungewear. He thanked her for spending the afternoon with Lily. His daughter had clearly enjoyed every moment. Caroline rinsed a mixing bowl, her movements unusually contemplative. "She's remarkable. Her mathematical intuition is genuinely advanced for her age. The way she grasped fraction concepts without formal instruction was impressive." Nathan leaned against the counter. "We need to talk about boundaries, about how attached Lily's getting." Caroline set the bowl down, her expression becoming serious. "I've noticed. The girls' baking time comment was definitely concerning. She's categorizing our relationship in ways we didn't anticipate." "This is exactly what my father warned about," Nathan said. "Children don't compartmentalize like adults do. To Lily, you're becoming a permanent part of her life, not a temporary arrangement with an expiration date." Caroline met his gaze directly. "What do you suggest? Should I create distance? Be less engaged when I'm here?" The questions held no defensiveness, just genuine concern about the right approach. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. Pulling back now might hurt her just as much. We've created an impossible situation where every option has the potential to cause harm." Caroline was silent for a long moment. "Perhaps we need to focus on being authentic in the moment, rather than trying to control outcomes we can't predict. I can spend time with Lily without encouraging specific role expectations. Just be present, without performing motherhood or strategizing about implications." The analytical approach was so characteristic that Nathan almost smiled despite the gravity of their discussion. "Life isn't a business problem you can solve with strategic planning, Caroline. Emotions don't follow project timelines or respond to optimization." Before she could respond, they heard it. Soft crying from Lily's room, the sound of a child in distress. Both moved immediately, some instinct overriding conscious thought. They rushed to the bedroom to find Lily sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face, clutching her stuffed astronaut. She'd had a bad dream, she managed, between sobs. About her mom. About the car accident she didn't actually remember, but had constructed in her imagination from overheard fragments and her own fears. Nathan sat on the bed's edge, pulling Lily into his arms with practiced comfort. "You're safe. It was just a dream. Daddy's here." He rocked her gently, murmuring reassurance in the tone that had soothed countless nightmares over the years. Caroline hovered in the doorway, uncertain of her role. Should she leave? Stay? What was appropriate in this moment that felt simultaneously intimate and fragile? Lily saw her through tears, reaching out one small hand. "Caroline, will you stay? Please?" The request carried such hope and need that refusing felt impossible. Caroline looked at Nathan, silently asking permission. He nodded slightly, acknowledging what they both knew. Lily needed whatever comfort they could provide, regardless of how it complicated their arrangement. Caroline approached the bed carefully, sitting on the opposite side from Nathan. Lily positioned herself between them, one hand holding her father's, the other reaching for Caroline's. "Can you tell me about stars?" The girl's voice was small, seeking distraction from whatever terrors had visited her dreams. "Daddy knows constellations. Caroline knows about planets. Together, you know everything." For the next 20 minutes, they took turns, Nathan pointing out the window toward barely visible stars in Chicago's light-polluted sky, naming constellations and the myths behind them. Caroline explaining planetary science, making complex concepts accessible through analogies a child could grasp. Lily between them, listening, calming, her breathing gradually evening out as fear gave way to fascination. She finally drifted back to sleep, peaceful now, still holding both their hands. Nathan and Caroline carefully extracted themselves, each gently placing Lily's hand on her beloved stuffed astronaut before tiptoeing from the room. In the hallway, they paused, looking at each other in the dim light. Something had passed between them in that shared moment of caring for a frightened child. Something that transcended their contract and made pretending increasingly difficult. Nathan whispered first, "We've created an impossible situation." Caroline's response came just as quietly, "I know." Neither was sure what to do about it. The admission hung between them, acknowledgement without solution, recognition without resolution. They returned to their separate bedrooms, the penthouse suddenly feeling both too large and too small for the complexity of what they'd built. Thursday morning brought Nathan's phone ringing during a routine brake job. Lily's school nurse with news that compressed his chest immediately. Lily was having a moderate asthma attack. They'd administered her rescue inhaler, but the nurse recommended medical evaluation to be safe. Nathan was 20 minutes away, he told her. Keep Lily with the nebulizer. He'd be there immediately. He hung up and immediately called Caroline, breaking his own rule about interrupting her during work hours. She answered during a board meeting, something she never did. But when she heard Nathan's voice saying Lily needed the emergency room, she stood without explanation. "Which hospital?" She was already gathering her things, board members staring at the unprecedented disruption. "Lurie Children's Hospital," Nathan told her. "I'm leaving now." Caroline addressed the room without apology. "Emergency. Derek, continue the presentation." She walked out, Derek and the others exchanging significant looks. Caroline never left meetings, never prioritized anything over Heart Technologies' business. This departure would be noted, analyzed, used somehow. She didn't care. Nathan arrived at the hospital first, finding Lily in a treatment room, breathing hard and scared. The sight of his daughter struggling for air always triggered something primal in him. Helplessness mixing with fierce protectiveness. Lily's eyes found him immediately. "Daddy." The single word carried relief and fear in equal measure. He held her carefully, mindful of her labored breathing. "I'm here, baby. The doctors will help. You're going to be fine." The reassurance was as much for himself as for her. Caroline arrived 10 minutes later, still in her business suit, hair disheveled from running through the parking structure, breathing hard herself. She saw Lily and something broke in her usually controlled expression. The mask slipped completely, revealing raw concern underneath. She rushed to the bedside, taking Lily's small hand in both of hers. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice caught in a way Nathan had never heard before. Lily's eyes lit up despite her distress. "Caroline came too?" The wonder in her voice cut through the medical efficiency surrounding them. Caroline's response emerged thick with emotion. "Of course I came. Of course." Nothing could have kept her away, the truth of that statement evident in her face and the way she gripped Lily's hand like anchoring herself to something precious. Dr. Patel arrived, the specialist Caroline's connections had secured, reviewing Lily's chart and quickly adding corticosteroids to the treatment. The girl would be fine, she assured them, But this episode indicated her current regimen wasn't preventing flare-ups adequately. They should discuss treatment adjustments. 90 minutes later, Lily was stable, breathing easier, drowsy from medications. Nathan and Caroline sat in consultation with Dr. Patel, listening to recommendations that carried financial implications neither could have imagined 6 months ago. The current approach wasn't preventing episodes, Dr. Patel explained. She recommended combination therapy, using biologics recently approved for pediatric asthma.
Highly effective. Excellent results in clinical trials. Also expensive, approximately $1,200 monthly out of pocket, even with good insurance. Nathan started calculating automatically, the old habit of measuring costs against impossible budgets. But before he could speak, Caroline had already answered. Start immediately, whatever Lily needs. Her voice left no room for negotiation or consideration of expense. Dr. Patel nodded, making notes. She'd write the prescriptions. They should see significant improvement within weeks. After she left, Nathan and Caroline sat beside sleeping Lily in the quiet hospital room. Nathan finally spoke. Thank you for everything. The insurance that made this possible, Dr. Patel, being here, all of it. Caroline watched Lily's peaceful face, her voice distant. I was terrified. Sitting in that meeting, and the phone rang, and all I could think was getting to her, getting here. She turned to Nathan, something raw and unguarded in her eyes. I've never left a board meeting before. Not once in 3 years as CEO, but I heard your voice, and nothing else mattered except making sure she was okay. She paused, seeming to struggle with articulation. This isn't... our arrangement specifies certain obligations, but what I felt wasn't obligation, it was... She couldn't finish the sentence, because she didn't know how to classify what she'd felt. Genuine fear. Real terror at the thought of Lily seriously hurt. Emotions that had no place in their contractual relationship. Nathan reached across the space between their chairs, his hand finding hers. I know. I felt it too. The fear wasn't performed or strategic. It was real. As real as anything he'd ever experienced. They sat in silence, hands linked, both recognizing the truth they'd been avoiding. This had stopped being pure performance somewhere along the way. The boundaries they'd so carefully established were dissolving, replaced by something neither had planned for or knew how to navigate. Lily stirred, her sleepy voice cutting through the moment. Are you both still here? The question carried such hope that answering felt inevitable. Yes, sweetheart, they replied in unison, the coordination unconscious. We're here. Lily smiled, eyes drifting closed again. Good. I like when you're both here together. It feels right. The simple statement hung in the air after she returned to sleep. Nathan and Caroline's hands remained linked on the hospital bed rail. Neither was certain when they'd reached for each other. Neither pulled away, choosing instead to sit in the truth Lily had articulated better than either adult could. That somehow, against all logic and planning, this felt right in ways that terrified them both. 3 months into the arrangement, early December brought Chicago's first real snow. Caroline stood at her office window watching flakes accumulate on the ledge, her mind less on the quarterly reports awaiting review than on the precarious balance they'd achieved. The sterling investment had been secured 2 weeks prior, signed with ceremony and congratulations. The board had renewed their confidence in her leadership. By every measurable metric, the arrangement had succeeded beyond initial projections. Yet success felt hollow when measured against complications nobody had quantified in contracts. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Need to talk urgently. Derek came to the garage. The message sent ice through her veins that had nothing to do with weather. She was in meetings until 6, she texted back,
already knowing that response was inadequate. They needed to strategize, to prepare, to mount whatever defense would protect what they'd built. His reply came terse. "Talk tomorrow, then." The dismissal stung more than it should have. Caroline tried refocusing on work, but found her concentration fractured, mind cycling through possibilities. What evidence had Derek gathered? How much did he actually know versus suspect? What damage could he inflict even with incomplete information? That evening, she returned to the penthouse after midnight, exhausted from back-to-back crisis management meetings about a server outage affecting their East Coast clients. She found Nathan still awake, helping Lily with a science project despite the late hour. The domestic scene, father and daughter bent over poster board and markers, struck her with unexpected force. Lily saw her first, face lighting with uncomplicated joy.
"Caroline, we're making a solar system model. Want to help with Saturn's rings?"
The invitation was so guileless, so assuming of Caroline's permanent place in their lives, that accepting felt both natural and terrifying. She set down her briefcase and joined them at the dining table, listening to Lily explain orbital distances while Nathan cut careful circles from construction paper. Only after Lily had gone to bed did they finally talk. Nathan's confrontation with Derek had been brief but pointed. The COO knew about their arrangement, had gathered financial records documenting the payments, had testimony from the housekeeper about separate bedrooms and formal interactions. He planned to present everything to the board, questioning Caroline's fitness for leadership based on deception. But there was more, Nathan continued, his voice carrying unexpected weight. Derek had a reason beyond simple ambition. His 8-year-old son, Michael, needed a heart transplant. The experimental procedure that offered the best chance required treatment at a specialized center, costs running into hundreds of thousands beyond what insurance covered. Derek needed the CEO position because the stock options would provide enough capital to save his child's life. The revelation recontextualized everything. Caroline sank into a chair, processing this information. "He's desperate," she said quietly. "Not just power-hungry. Desperate." Nathan nodded. "Doesn't excuse the methods, but it explains the intensity. He's a father trying to save his son. I understand that motivation, even if I can't condone threatening you to achieve it." They spent the next hour reviewing their options, building defensive strategies, preparing for the confrontation that now seemed inevitable. But Caroline's mind kept returning to Derek's son, to the impossible mathematics of medical costs versus parental desperation. She understood that calculation better now than she would have 3 months ago, before Lily's emergency room visits had taught her the particular terror of a child struggling to breathe. The board meeting arrived with the weight of consequence. 2:00 on a Tuesday afternoon. Full board assembled in Heart Technology's main conference room. Caroline had spent the morning delivering her quarterly presentation, numbers strong enough to deflect most concerns. Then Derek requested the floor. His evidence was comprehensive and damning. Financial transfers to Nathan documented in meticulous detail, timeline analysis showing how conveniently the marriage had solved Caroline's sterling problem. Testimony from household staff about the separate bedrooms, the formal distance maintained when they thought themselves unobserved. Derek built his case with prosecutorial precision, each piece of evidence another nail in the coffin of Caroline's credibility. The board members shifted uncomfortably, murmurs of concern rippling through the room. Corporate governance violations, questions about judgment, potential fraud implications if Sterling discovered the deception. The carefully constructed foundation of Caroline's authority was crumbling beneath methodical assault. Caroline sat motionless, letting Derek finish his presentation. When he finally concluded, silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then she stood, every eye in the room tracking her movement. My relationship with Nathan Cole began under unconventional circumstances, she stated clearly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who decided truth was the only viable defense. The board had expressed concerns about my personal stability. Sterling Investment made similar observations about family structure and long-term commitment. Mr. Vaughn is correct that timing was convenient. She paused, making eye contact with each board member. But he's missed the most important development. Before she could continue, the conference room door opened. Nathan entered, still wearing his work clothes from the garage, grease stains visible on his jeans despite obvious attempts to clean up.
His presence shifted the room's energy. Corporate polish meeting working-class authenticity in a collision neither side had fully anticipated. Nathan moved to stand beside Caroline, presenting a united front they hadn't explicitly planned. He addressed the board directly, his voice steady despite the hostile environment. I won't deny that practical considerations factored into the beginning of our relationship. Caroline needed to satisfy concerns about stability. I needed financial security to provide proper medical care for my daughter. His honesty cut through the room's tension like a blade. Those facts are accurate, but they're not the whole story. He looked at Caroline, and something passed between them that transcended performance. When my wife died, I built walls to protect my daughter and myself from further loss. I told myself I'd never let anyone that close again, but Caroline found her way through those defenses, not through strategy or calculation, but through genuine care for my daughter, through showing up when Lily needed her, through becoming essential to both of us in ways I never anticipated. His words carried a weight that shifted the room's attention from scandal to something more complex. Whether this board recognizes our relationship or not, what we've built matters. It's worth protecting. It's worth fighting for. Not because a contract obligates us, but because it's become real somewhere along the way. Caroline felt something crack open in her chest, a vulnerability she'd spent years armoring against. She turned to the board, abandoning the defensive strategy they'd prepared. When my father built this company, he taught me that success requires adaptation, that rigid thinking leads to obsolescence. What Nathan and I created may have unconventional origins, but its current value is genuine. She looked at Derek, her voice firm. You've spent so much energy exposing how we began that you've missed what we've become. That's the same limited vision that makes you unsuitable for leadership, seeing only historical data instead of recognizing evolution in real time. The counterattack landed, shifting focus from their arrangement to Derek's fitness for the position he coveted. Board members' expressions changed, recalibrating their assessment of the situation. James Hart spoke next, his authority as founder carrying particular weight. Derek, in your enthusiasm to discredit Caroline, you've admitted to surveillance of employees, invasion of privacy, and bribing household staff for information. The board will need to review these activities separately, as they raise serious questions about your judgment and ethics. The strategic redirection further undermined Derek's position, transforming him from whistleblower to liability. But before anyone could respond, Derek stood, his composure finally cracking. His voice emerged raw with desperation. My son needs a heart transplant. The procedure that gives him the best chance costs more than I can ever earn in my current position. I need the CEO stock options to save Michael's life. He looked around the room, pride dissolving into naked plea. I'm not proud of my methods, but what would any of you do to save your child? The confession hung in the air, reframing everything yet again. Caroline saw her own reflection in Derek's desperation, a parent willing to do whatever necessary to protect a child. The parallel was uncomfortable and undeniable. The board called for recess to deliberate privately. 45 minutes of waiting in an anteroom, Nathan and Caroline sitting side by side, hands linked without conscious decision.
When they were finally called back, the verdict came measured and political. Caroline would retain her position pending full review of all evidence.
Eric was placed on administrative leave during investigation of his information-gathering methods. The Sterling contract would remain in force unless material breach could be proven. Essentially a draw, with enough ambiguity to satisfy no one while offending everyone minimally. But before anyone could adjourn, Caroline made a request. She needed to address Derek's situation directly if the board would permit a brief sidebar. The chairman, clearly exhausted by the afternoon's drama, agreed with visible reluctance. Caroline turned to Derek, her voice losing its corporate armor. "Tell me about Michael. What exactly does he need?" Derek looked suspicious of the question, but answered. "Experimental procedure at Boston Children's Hospital. Specialized surgeons, extended recovery, immunosuppressant protocols. Total cost around $300,000 after insurance." Caroline glanced at Nathan, seeing understanding in his eyes. "We'd like Heart Technologies Charitable Foundation to cover Michael's medical expenses. All of them. No strings, no obligations beyond Derek's resignation as COO, an agreement to transition his responsibilities over the next month." The board erupted in surprised murmurs. Derek stared at her, incomprehension fighting with desperate hope. "Why would you do this? After what I tried to do?" "Because I understand desperate fathers trying to protect their children," Caroline replied simply. "Because kindness isn't weakness. It's often the bravest choice available. And because perpetuating cycles of harm serves no one's interests, including our own." Nathan added his voice. "Lily's health taught me that nothing matters more than your kid. You were wrong in your methods, but not your motivation. We can't fix everything, but we can fix this." Derek's composure shattered completely. The proud executive broke down, weeks of accumulated terror and stress releasing in a rush. The board, clearly uncomfortable with such raw emotion in their polished conference room, quickly agreed to Caroline's proposal and adjourned. In the aftermath, as people filed out exchanging significant glances, Nathan and Caroline remained seated. The confrontation had stripped away pretense, forced authenticity neither had planned to display. They defended their arrangement by acknowledging it had transcended its origins, had become something neither could easily categorize or control. 2 weeks later, Caroline found herself on the penthouse rooftop garden, an outdoor space she rarely used, but Nathan had insisted on preparing for tonight. December evening cold bit through her coat, but strings of lights provided warmth beyond their illumination. He'd asked for a date night, something so far outside their arrangement's parameters that agreeing had required conscious choice. Lily was staying with Mrs. Rodriguez for the evening, giving them privacy neither had sought, but both perhaps needed. Nathan had arranged simple decorations, blankets against the cold, the Chicago skyline providing its own spectacular backdrop. No elaborate romance, just quiet intimacy that felt more meaningful than grand gestures. "I need to ask you something real," Nathan began, his breath visible in cold air. "Not CEO to contractor, not arrangement partners. Just me and you." Caroline waited, heart accelerating despite attempts at calm. "These past months, living with you, watching you with Lily, seeing who you are beneath all the armor you wear to work. I've fallen in love with you." The declaration emerged simple and direct, carrying the weight of truth without embellishment. Caroline's first instinct was retreat into analysis, into questioning whether emotions developed within artificial constructs could be genuine. But Nathan continued before she could deflect. "I know because of how I feel when you're not performing. When you bring almond croissants and teach fractions using measuring cups. When you rush from board meetings because Lily needs you. That's who I love.
the real person beneath the strategic thinking. Caroline felt tears threatening, an unusual loss of control. How do you know it's real? We've been playing roles for so long. What if we only work because of the structure, the defined parameters? Nathan stepped closer, his hands finding hers. I know because of moments like Lily's asthma attack. The terror in your eyes wasn't strategic. The way you've slowly stopped performing around us, how you've let us see the person you are when you're not proving anything to anyone. Caroline's voice emerged small, vulnerable in ways she rarely allowed. What if you realize I'm not worth it? That underneath all the success and capability, I'm just scared and lonely and have no idea how to actually be in a relationship. Then we figure it out together, Nathan replied. No contracts, no timelines, just two people choosing each other every day because we want to, not because we're obligated to. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple silver band. Nothing extravagant, just honest craftsmanship. I know you have jewelry worth more than this, but I bought this with my own money. As Nathan asking Caroline, not as part of any arrangement. Will you marry me? For real this time? Caroline looked at the ring, at the man offering it, at the life they could choose instead of the one they'd constructed. The answer emerged through tears. Yes. But I want to do it right. Real wedding, real vows, real choice. Their kiss held none of the restraint from their courthouse ceremony. Just two people who'd found unexpected love in the strangest circumstances, choosing to make it official, not because anyone demanded it, but because they genuinely wanted forever together. 6 months later, June sunshine sparkled off Lake Michigan at the Hart family estate. 30 guests gathered on the private beach, an intimate ceremony that bore no resemblance to their efficient courthouse transaction. Lily served as flower girl again, this time in a dress she'd helped Caroline pick, her joy uncomplicated by confusion about what was happening. Morgan stood as maid of honor, her earlier skepticism transformed into genuine happiness for her friend. James walked Caroline down a makeshift aisle, his eyes bright with satisfaction at seeing his daughter choose love over strategy. The Sterlings had sent traditional congratulations and a generous gift, their note expressing appreciation for the honesty Caroline and Nathan had demonstrated. Even Derek attended with Michael, the boy's recovery progressing well. Both of them living proof that compassion could break cycles of competition and harm. Caroline's vows came from the heart, rather than careful preparation. I'm good at contracts, but terrible at feelings. You taught me that the best partnerships can't be planned or optimized. They just are, if you're brave enough to let them. I choose you, Nathan Cole, every day from this one forward. Nathan's response carried equal weight. I thought I'd had my chance at love and lost it forever. You proved me wrong. Showed me my heart wasn't as closed as I'd convinced myself. I choose you, Caroline Hart, for all the messy, unplanned, beautiful days ahead. Lily added her own contribution, spontaneous and perfect. I choose you too, Caroline, as my mom, the choosing kind, not the born kind, but just as real. Not a dry eye remained among the witnesses. James offered a toast about unconventional paths, sometimes leading to the most meaningful destinations. Morgan spoke of watching Caroline become fully herself for the first time in 15 years of friendship. Derek's brief words acknowledged the grace that had saved his son and taught him about leadership beyond ambition. The reception was small and genuine, dancing on the beach as the sun set, Lily positioned between Caroline and Nathan for their first dance as a real family. The song was admittedly cheesy, the choreography non-existent, their laughter as they stepped on each other's feet absolutely authentic. Later, as guests began departing, Caroline stood with Nathan, watching Lily play with Michael at the water's edge, both children healthy and happy in ways that had seemed impossible months earlier. "This started as the most practical decision I ever made," Caroline observed. "Pure strategy, clear objectives, defined outcomes." Nathan's arm came around her waist
And became the best decision you ever made for completely different reasons. She leaned into him, feeling truly home in a way that had nothing to do with addresses or square footage.
"Best contract I never finished," she murmured. Nathan laughed. "Technically, we voided that one entirely." "Best decision, then," Caroline amended. "Best choice." "Agreed," Nathan replied, pulling her closer. "Now let's go make sure our daughter doesn't convince Michael that jellyfish are friendly." They walked toward the children together, the setting sun painting everything gold and perfect. Not because they'd planned it that way, but because sometimes the most extraordinary things emerged from the most unlikely beginnings. Sometimes arrangements became real. Sometimes business deals transformed into love stories. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to let go of control, life surprised you with exactly what you needed in forms you never anticipated. The unconventional merger had succeeded beyond any metric they'd originally defined. Not because it satisfied board requirements or secured investments, but because it had built something genuine from strategic foundations. A family created through choice rather than obligation. Love that emerged from transaction but transcended its origins entirely. As Lily's laughter carried across the beach and Nathan's hand found Caroline's, she understood finally what her father had meant about life not respecting imposed boundaries. What mattered wasn't how things began, but what you chose to build from unexpected starting points. And they had built something beautiful, messy and complicated, and absolutely worth every risk they'd taken to get here.